Hey, hello everyone. I think welcome to another episode of speaking to like the top content marketing leaders in the world. Then I'm streaming in again here from New York. Very glad to have Nancy Ryerson here. She's the content marketing director for Lantern. Earlier worked at really fast-growing companies, including that of Carrot, Antidote, Fern Health. Before that, worked in the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Nancy, so good to have you here in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Super. So Nancy, I think let's start with knowing what your company does in total. I mean, Lantern, a lot of people would not know, but it's an interesting model that they have. That's like a B2B to C model. It's the specialty healthcare space, upcoming rising thing overall with a lot of technology integration, at least that way I see it. But would be lovely to kind of hear the sales pitch from you. Let's start with that and then probably know Nancy better. But yeah, go ahead.
Great. Yeah. It's funny. A lot of the companies I've worked with have been B2B. And sometimes I'll be talking to a friend and they'll say, well, I've never heard of that. And I'll always say, well, you're not my target audience. That's why you haven't heard of it. But yeah, Lantern, like several of the other companies I've worked with, is an employee benefit. So, really large companies like 7-Eleven, for example, Home Depot, they will offer benefits like Lantern to their employees. And what Lantern is a specialty care platform. So it's really used for those really kind of expensive, costly, complicated journeys. So getting surgery, cancer treatment, especially medications. And for the employee, we make it really easy to access high quality care. Mm-hmm. So, if you're as just a regular person navigating the healthcare system, it can be hard to know, am I going to see the best person for this particular procedure? We really don't have any way of knowing that. So what my company does is make that easy for people to navigate. And at the same time, we negotiate better rates than the main insurance companies do. So we're able to save employers money. And we also reduce costs by just getting better outcomes. So, someone goes in for a knee replacement, they're seeing someone who's just like the best at what they do. So then that person doesn't need to go back because of complications and that kind of thing. So yeah, I love talking to our members. They always say, oh, this is such a different experience in terms of healthcare. It's really like the best experience I've had is what they say a lot, because I don't know if you've ever called an insurance company. You have to hold music. Sometimes you're like, is this person AI?
Yeah.
Am I even really talking to someone? But we really, hold their hand through the process and create just a great experience.
That is super cool, Nancy. I think we'd love to start with knowing Nancy as a person, by the way. I mean, where did you grow up? How did you land up in this? You're one of those few people, like I was telling you before we started shooting as well, who has been in the healthcare space for a while, has been in all, say 1 to 10 kind of growth companies, particularly in general, and also healthcare companies that are native to digital, basically. So I think we'd love to get a sense about how did you land up over here? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to college? What did you study? Was marketing something? And content particularly was something that you kind of always wanted to focus on. We'd love to get to know your story better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up originally on Long Island in Amityville. You might know it as the home of the Amityville Horror House. That's what I usually say to people. Sometimes people know it, sometimes they don't.
Do people ask you, have you ever been there?
Yes, if they know it, then they would will. Ask, yeah. And my answer is that I did walk past it. And of course, on Halloween, you don't want to walk by and that kind of stuff. And then my family moved to Savannah, Georgia when I was a kid. So I lived down there. Actually also a very haunted, spooky type city. So that's just one through line in my story there. Yeah. But then I did want to come back to New York. So I came to NYU for college. I studied journalism and English. I've always loved to write. And yeah, journalism really was a great experience. I think I always knew that it wasn't the most lucrative field for most. So I kind of had in the back of my mind that, oh, I know there's PR, I know there's marketing, but I thought that journalism school just gave me such a great foundation for learning how to ask questions, talk to people, get to kind of the truth of something, and then also structure writing so that it's, interesting and engages people. So I'm really grateful for everything that I learned in journalism school. And it was just so fun to go around New York and interview random people one of my beats was Chinatown. So I would talk to people in small businesses about like issues that matter to them and that kind of thing. So that was really cool. And then as part of journalism school, I did a few internships. One of the first ones was at Psychology Today. And that was really when I started going down that health pathway. And what I liked about it was, you know, they would give us a research study that was just like so hard to read and understand. And our job was to translate it into something, you know, that would, at the time in a print magazine, I don't know if everyone remembers what those are, but it would just be like a little small box and it would have like a fun graphic, you know, of a brain or whatever. And we would just try to make it interesting and engaging. But the source content would be something like super dense. So I just thought that was a really, really fun writing challenge. So that's always something I've liked about healthcare. And then, you know, as I went forward in my career, healthcare affects everyone. You know, at places I've worked, we've said like everyone is a patient at some point. Most people have the experience also of being a caregiver at some point. And especially in the US, you know, our system is so complicated, has so many issues. So really most of the places I've worked have been trying to solve some of those problems. And I just think they've always been really, you know, interesting challenges to solve. And in terms of the digital side, my first job was actually in journalism, although in a way it was also content marketing, but we didn't use that term back then.
Yeah.
It was weirdly enough at a medical equipment company, used medical equipment, which sounds, you know, a little odd.
Used medical equipment.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if they're still in business, but they would actually, I think, like sell like MRI scanners and stuff like that, but a lot of the time to other countries. Anyway, the CEO wanted to start a magazine, really as content marketing, but he hired journalists that I would talk to medical equipment manufacturers and hospital executives and stuff like that. It was really pretty interesting. But on the promotion side, I remember they would just tweet out just a link with no like additional context or anything. And it was when social media was sort of first coming out, and that just really, you know, caught my eye. Like I liked writing, but I also wanted to make sure people actually saw it. Yeah. So that was when I first got into social media at the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And I also, you know, started doing content marketing for lead generation, growing our email list and that kind of stuff. And really the rest is history. I think once I started down the healthcare path, I just always really liked it. And I think also companies, they do like hiring people who understand the healthcare space because it is complicated.
Right.
Like I know on my current team when I was hiring, you know, I spoke to people who didn't have a healthcare background, but ended up hiring people who did just because it's so nuanced and there's such a steep learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. I think I'm most fascinated by your story of ghosts now. Because I think it's been there with you all throughout. And now I'm going to ask you that at the end. But no, this is super cool. I think Nancy would also love to get a chance around speaking to you more about your professional career as well. I mean, you've been in companies like Antidote, Carrot, Lantern, all of these companies. B2B healthcare is something that people still don't understand really well. I don't think people understand it still well from a marketing audience perspective. Like when it comes to any upcoming marketers, if you tell them healthcare marketing, the first thing that strikes their chord is actually working maybe direct to consumer in that case, right? So would be lovely to kind of tell more about what does the entire B2B healthcare marketing entails? And then if you can go deeper into your careers at Carrot, at Antidote, at Fern, and then of course Lantern, and I'm going to go deeper into Lantern later, but would just love to get a sense around making people understand the entire B2B healthcare marketing through the eyes of working in these companies particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you have kind of a global audience. So I will say, you know, specifically in the US, most people get their health insurance through their employer. Yeah. So there isn't really as much. I mean, there is a lot of direct to consumer advertising, but even if you think about a commercial, you know, for a medication, it's always ask your doctor. There's really not that much healthcare that we as consumers can just go buy. It is through, you know, our employer or through, you know, Medicare or Medicaid. So as part of that, employers, especially large employers, instead of necessarily offering insurance plans, you know, through something like Blue Cross or Aetna, they're called self-funded plans. So they pay all of the claims. If I go to the doctor, it might be administered through an insurance company that people will be familiar with, but it's actually my employer who would be paying the bill. So employers are really incentivized then to try and keep their employees healthy and reduce those costs. And there are a lot of different ways that they try to do this. And this is a whole world that I really didn't know existed because I have worked more for smaller companies who don't really offer these kinds of benefits. Yeah. But, it's interesting. A lot of our customers are these huge employers. And there's a whole world of employee benefits. And like I mentioned earlier, I rarely encounter anyone who has necessarily heard of it, but it's such a huge market and world. There are like websites specifically for employee benefits, news, and all these different things. So I've
seen complete websites just for employee benefits. I mean, that people have made those websites. Right? So.
No, it's really big space. So, and I like it. I think there's been a lot of innovation in it. It grew a lot, definitely in the last 10 years. There's some conversation now that maybe it grew too much, and some of these companies are starting to consolidate, and benefits leaders really taking a hard look at what's really delivering value for their company. But it's interesting. And I think what I like about B2B also is that I just have found that there are more opportunities for, it's a long sales cycle. So there are going to be a lot of content touch points. And that's just something that I enjoy.
Nice. Cool. Love to get a sense around Lantern. I mean, what does your role entail, and then how do you guys, you're in a B2B2C model. The most interesting part I like about this, and I'm coming back and back again in the type of models, because the content that you create is for the stakeholders that you kind of manage, right? In a B2B2C model, the content that has to be created has to kind of take up both audiences, your employer as well as your employees in that case, right? And I mean, the purpose of content on both ends is very different. For the employer, it's maybe the demand generation side and the customer engagement side that comes in. But maybe for the employee, it is more actually the benefit of the employee that happens through the education part of it, maybe in that case, right? So, and again, healthcare as an ecosystem, I feel is very interesting because you got to have the data analytics side of the world on one front, but there's also a lot of emotional part to the entire healthcare content that you create, right? So how you kind of striking the chords between these X and Y axes, right? The X axis on the other end, kind of the X axis on the two ends is basically the emotional versus the data analytical side of content, and the Y axis is maybe like the stakeholders, like the employers and the employees kind of thing. How are you kind of working in this quadrant completely? Love to get a sense around that at Lantern.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on the B2B buyer side, you're totally right that there is, a tension between we want to talk about cost savings and the bottom line, but at the end of the day, we're all people, and benefits leaders do care about supporting their employees. So there is a lot of messaging about the member experience as well. But the messages are very different. And actually, this came up just recently. We were, redoing our website because we recently rebranded to Lantern. And we were thinking, we have things about cost savings or certain terminology that if you're a benefits leader, you know exactly what that means. Like PE, PM means like per employee per month. But of course, if you surveyed, 100 people in the street, no one's going to know what that is. So
there's a term like a PPM. Per employee per month.
Per employee per month savings. It's like a number that we have on our homepage, which, to an HR leader, they would say, oh, that's great. But a regular person would not understand. I have no idea what this means, and it can start to create that confusing experience. So, that's something that is always a challenge with the B2B to C world. Because it is pretty different audiences, but you, of course, do still want brand consistency. You want some kind of language consistency. And I think there's also a challenge to it because in some ways, the companies I've worked with are limited in how much we can directly reach the end users of the product. So a lot of it is in the hands of the employer. Are they going to send out emails promoting it? We can do some direct contact, but it's usually somewhat limited. So we also have to empower them to pitch, the product to their employees. And they want them to use it because they want them to be healthier and they want the company to save money. But it is, there's a lot of content strategizing in terms of distribution that goes on as well.
Very interesting. And would love to also get a sense around when it comes to kind of this is what you told in the top funnel of the content, basically the one that you're speaking of, right? But what does that mid funnel and bottom funnel for the employees look like? Because I think the patient experience after they have kind of taken or claimed maybe working with you guys is also super important in that case, right? How have you been able to kind of help them out during the consumer journey entirely for the employees in that case? Love to get a sense around that.
For employees, yeah. I mean, especially at Lantern, we really do offer so much guidance. That's really even why we ended up naming the company Lantern. It's supposed to be,
Okay.
a guide and a light, through the darkness.
Yes.
So, and I think in the front end and the top funnel, we do need to kind of build that trust. But really our call to action for the most part is really just to call us. And once they talk to those care advocates, those guides, they're able to ask all their questions, and they really are generally sold on the program at that point because it's such a different experience and it's so helpful for them.
Interesting. And Nancy, I think would love to also get a quick sense around, given that you've been working in this space, the most like one of the biggest parts of this space is the subject matter expertise of the content creators who are creating that content. And you slightly touch base upon it when you said the kind of people you wanted in your team were the ones who ended up taking up people who were like working in the healthcare system earlier, right? Would love to get a sense around how do people kind of get trained towards there? Because I don't think a lot of new people entering the content marketing space know with the fact, hey, I want to do healthcare particularly.
Yeah.
So let's learn healthcare content. There's no way like that, right? So how is that entire people and the process phenomena for you when it comes to bringing the subject matter expertise on board? It would be lovely for a lot of other marketers trying to do their same subject matter expert domain expertise in different industries maybe, but the process might be helpful for them. So love to get a sense if you shed light on that.
Yeah. I think anytime you're in a space where, I think it's good to know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming back to the journalism theme. And actually, I think both of the people on my team studied journalism as well. So they're not doctors, but they know how to talk to doctors.
Okay.
They know what questions to ask, and then they know how to translate that subject matter expertise into content. And yeah, I think if anyone was interested in getting into the healthcare space, which I do think, it's growing. I think it's pretty stable.
Yeah.
I recommend it. I think it's interesting. It's not for everybody, but I do think it's interesting. I think anytime you talk to someone who's like pretty technical and you have to turn that into something, engaging while keeping it accurate, I think that's a really valuable skill. And then also just the skill of getting into the head of a buyer who's very different from you. I've never worked in employee benefits. I'm not a doctor, and I think that's something that I like about the B2B side as well, is that there is that challenge in terms of getting into the persona and really just trying to understand someone versus like, what would I buy just as me? It's just very different. So I think anyone who has that experience of marketing to someone pretty different from yourself, I think that is valuable too.
Interesting. Got it. And I'd love to kind of speak more about the entire digital nativeness that we spoke of, and AI being the big fish in the room right now. I mean, it's been just a conversation all around. I still have an opinion that AI is there for augmentation, particularly to maybe speeden up your mundane tasks. But it can still, in a category like yours, a subject matter expertise of that importance, unless there's humans kind of working on it using AI, it's not going to replace the category as a whole. Right.
Yeah.
That's a very 10,000 feet view that I'm trying to give on that. But love to get a sense from you around how are you using parts of generative AI to kind of optimize on your content processes internally right now.
Yeah. I think as a writer, and I think a lot of people in this kind of space, when it first came out, there was a little bit of a freak out moment, like, oh, is this coming, for my job? And it was kind of, I'm sure we all of played around with it, like write a little song, write a poem.
Yeah.
And I think you do realize pretty quickly, I just kept coming back to oh, this isn't very original, which of course is by definition, it is not original. But I am trying to use it more. I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh, the internet, that'll never catch on. I worry about that. I think I'm too young, to go down that kind of Luddite path. And I did use it recently for help repurposing, really. I needed to quickly put together an email promoting in a webinar that I was doing. So I gave it, the landing page copy, and I said who the audience was and what format I wanted. And I didn't use most of what it created, but it had like pretty good like bullet takeaways, and I did use those with some tweaking. So yeah,
you're using it for ideation. I mean, that
I don't use it as much for like blank page ideation. I think because the space that I'm in is just so nuanced that there's honestly not really that much out there, even at our own company yet, for it to build on. But it was helpful for, summarizing and, asking it like, what do you feel like are the takeaway points from this? And it actually was also a good editing step, because when it spat out the takeaways, I was like, I agree. Like, but that said to me that what I had already written was clear. And then hopefully it would, if it's clear, to AI, hopefully it'd be clear to a reader as well. So I thought that was helpful. Yeah, I know people on my team like it for brainstorming. It is helpful for sure for proofreading, another set of eyes, so to speak. But I'm still playing around with it. I could definitely see it saving time if I could build in maybe some like key phrases, company boilerplate, just for that QA and consistency. That's something I'd like to do more of next year. We do use like Grammarly for that kind of stuff, and that's definitely helpful. We use healthcare one word, health space care is also correct. So you do need another tool that's going to catch those like style guide details. So that's been really helpful.
Very cool. And I think you mentioned about that thing that initially when it had come in, people thought their jobs would be gone, and then probably it became an augmentation methodology. That's the same what happened with Grammarly. When Grammarly got launched, every editor in the world thought their job is gone, because now who's going to edit the same? Now if you see, Grammarly is the best friend of every editor.
Yes.
They're trying to kind of make their lives faster. So I think that's what generative AI has a role to play in the lives of a writer particularly.
Yeah, because I think you're right. No one's passion, I don't think, is let me really check these commas, But that's something that if you can automate really the most mundane elements, and then, that opens you up more for like the higher level thinking.
Interesting. We were listening to one of your older podcasts, basically, right? Or older, I mean, not too old in that case, but you mentioned a bit more about the customer marketing angle of how testimonials and customers evangelizing for you is the best form of influencer marketing that you probably can get, right? I'd love to get a sense around that. I mean, how has it worked for you? One. Second, I think everyone in the world wants to do it. It's not that healthcare, not just healthcare, everyone in the world wants to do it. But operationally, it is almost infeasible to do that, because there are so many people across different parts of the globe who are ready to kind of give testimonials. Maybe first, so finding those people is tough. Second, once you've found them, convincing them is tough. Third, then operationally bringing that testimonial into a video is very tough in general. How have you been able to scale that up and manage that well?
Yeah, I think it's about taking advantage of the moment when you have it. So you are right. Like, these are very busy people. It's hard to get time with them. So when you do, just making the most of it that you can. We have at my company a library of quotes from our clients that we can pull into other pieces. I do that all the time. I'll send writers like, here's the transcript of a webinar we did with a customer, repurpose it, and I think that's maybe a difference with journalism. I think that would be not really great if you're just like, oh, I talked to this guy 6 months ago, but I'm going to put it in this article now. Like, I feel like that wouldn't really be a good thing. But in content marketing, I think you really can. And just helping that interview go farther, and then also using it to inspire, future pieces, because you hear directly from them.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of, I think getting bang for your buck from testimonials is really powerful. And yeah, I mean, related to AI, and I think this is what I said in the other podcast, that people want to hear from someone and even like see them, because I'm sure AI will eventually, like, we can watch a whole movie where everyone's AI, but I think at the moment you can tell the difference. Like, okay, this is a real person who's really talking about this. This is someone they're not paid to do this. This is someone I, relate to and respect, and I'm hearing it right from them. Is just, really powerful.
Next question I have is around the entire content conviction aspect. Now, we call something as content conviction. And how I define content conviction is, not a lot of companies in their management side have a conviction on actually building on content basically, and it is usually the job of people like you guys who are trying to kind of build that conviction back into the company, saying why do we want to invest long term in an organic content particularly, right? A lot of marketers do struggle with this because they're not able to kind of figure out how to do that, right? And you've been lucky enough to work in a company like a Michael J. Fox, which is earlier like a very, I mean, it's a large, it's a traditional healthcare company, right? On that front, to working in something like a Lantern, which is super digitally native in this case, right? You've seen, because the other two sides of the spectrum, basically, either sides of them, right? Love to get a sense around what are your thoughts on building this content conviction in organizations, within your teams, within your management, everyone across?
Yeah, I think in my career, I've heard people think content just means the blog, but content really is everywhere your business appears.
Yeah.
I don't think people really argue so much these days that, oh, I don't need to be on social media. Like, I don't need a website. But everything on social media, on the website, every email you send, like in a way that is content.
Right.
And if your organization can tell a consistent story, there's like the famous thing that you need to see something 5 to 7 times before it really sticks with you. And I think that really is true. And that's why you really need to hit people, wherever they are. Maybe it's reading a blog, maybe it's watching a video, maybe it's just looking at something on LinkedIn, and having that cohesive strategy where wherever someone goes, whoever they hear from at your company, they're hearing that same story and those same value propositions. And that's really the value of content is getting your brand out there and, the problems you're solving and building that trust through, repeating and having those consistent foundational messages.
That is interesting. I think thanks for this. Cool. I think I'm not gonna bore you more about so much of knowledge base that's coming out of you. Thank you so much for kind of helping us with that. But we just moved to the last leg of our conversation, right? The last leg is something I own. So we've had people call themselves everything, right? From a bathroom singer to a rock star to a song singer, whatever. I mean, people have called themselves. This is a rapid fire round, basically, right? Where we get to know you better on the fun side of Nancy, maybe in this case. You got 6 seconds to answer all questions that I shoot at you. These questions range everywhere from personal to professional to preferences, everything. I mean, in general, overall. So let's do that if that's okay.
Yeah.
Super. Are you scared of ghosts?
Am I scared? Yeah.
You are, right? Okay. I'm gonna come back to this. But Nancy, humble brag.
Humble brag. I know like hundreds of songs at karaoke.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You do that often?
I do.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some New York karaoke bar options from you
Yeah.
next. Yeah. Favorite holiday destination?
I really liked Paris.
You really like Paris?
Just been once, but it was a favorite.
It was good. Oh, nice. Comfort food?
Popcorn.
Oh, is it popcorn?
Yes, love popcorn.
Very nice. Do you like the original popcorn or like any kind of popcorn?
I think movie theater is
The movie theater is
best.
salted
Yes.
popcorn, butter popcorn.
Yes.
Right, that one. Perfect. Do you have something for caramel popcorn? Like, I hate them.
It's not my favorite.
It's
Yeah,
not your favorite.
not my
right?
favorite.
Yeah, okay. Favorite book?
I would say my favorite book is Moby Dick.
Top 3 tabs that are always open on your laptop.
We are a Microsoft company, so I have my SharePoint open. Probably an article that I opened from LinkedIn about content marketing that I may or may not get around to reading.
Yeah.
And then definitely some Word documents.
Some Word document. Okay. If you were not in the healthcare space, what space would you love to be in?
I have been thinking about this recently. I did a video shoot in Dallas at our headquarters, and some of the people on the film crew had worked on some reality shows. And I do feel like I could be a reality show producer. It uses that journalism skill, like asking people questions, stirring up the drama. I feel like it would be a little immoral, but I do think it would be pretty fun. So
You're a
sometimes I think
storyteller.
about that.
You're
Yeah.
a storyteller at heart, right? I mean,
Yes,
you'd
yes.
like to get the. If not in a content marketing role, what role would you be in?
I think I mean, is it cheating to say like communications and PR? They're very related.
No, they're very.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think also having done a podcast and working on more multimedia, I think that side of stuff is really interesting too. And I've thought about maybe taking a class on like audio editing or video editing or something like that. It's just something that interests me.
If I were to go to speak to people who are the closest to you at work, what would be the 3 things they would say they hate about you?
I mean, I hope not too much.
They hate about you a bit. Let me put it this way.
You know, I'm very agreeable, and I do wonder if people might think that I say yes too quickly before I know the full story. I don't think I ultimately let people down. But I have had people say, like, are you sure? You know, so I think, you know, I need to get a little more detail before I always say yes to requests.
Oh, very nice. Last 2 questions. What is your favorite brand?
I really like Etsy. I've always been crafty, and I think that they support small businesses and they, you know, reach their target audience well of people who like buying, you know, little crafty things. So I'm just always
Are you like the
them.
stationery person?
Yes, love stationery. Absolutely.
Are you sure? No, but last question. What is that one brand you think who does a lot of marketing, but you think that marketing is of no use? Like you really hate their marketing. You're like, hey, I mean, I know this brand, but I mean, this poster that you put out, or this hoarding that you put out, or this content that they put out is of no use.
You know, my husband teases me because I'm actually like very positive about most commercials and ads that I see and stuff like that. I think I just have empathy for my equivalent. Yeah, you know, the marketer. So I'm not really like that harsh on marketing, but I definitely don't love something that's so conceptual that once you see it, you're like, what was that a commercial for?
Anything that you saw that recent past?
Yeah. I mean, most Super Bowl commercials, like, for example, I think get so far out there. But, you know, they try. I think, I don't know if I want to go on the record criticizing any
The last time I was asking this question to someone, he mentioned about Lululemon. He said, except for if you've known the brand, or else you don't understand it's a clothing company after you've seen their poster. And then every time I see a Lululemon poster right now, I realize, hey, you're right. I mean, because if I remove the logo.
Yeah.
That is super good, but that is super fun. Last question. If you were to kind of just, I mean, restart your career once again now with all the things that you've done, one thing that you'll fundamentally change about everything, and there's a serious rapid fire question.
Yeah, actually, we were chatting about this before we started recording, but I read a tip that was recommended starting your career at a larger, more established company so you can get a sense of processes that are, you know, really established and that have worked and what a, you know, financially successful business, how that functions. And then from there, if you want to go the startup route, you know, you'll at least have some of those foundational experiences. And I think if I could go back, I would be curious to try that. I do love startups. I love collaborating and being busy and all of that. But not everywhere I worked has been as process driven. And I think because of that, I'm not always the most process driven. I think that would have been interesting to have kind of more of that foundational experience. But I like my career and how it's gone. Yeah. But if I were to give someone advice, I would tell them to, you know, consider that.
Makes sense. That is super good, Nancy. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest. It was pleasure hosting you. Almost all answers point to point, no fumbling across the board. Thank you so much for this. It was really a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
Super.